guys, welcome to another episode of New Game Plus. I'm Jason, I'm joined by Megan. Good to see you again.
You too, thanks for having me back.
Well, look, Jack comes in and he does his thing and then he just leaves like he always does.
He treats us good there, right? It's fine.
Damn,
I miss him.
It's like full like Beyonce lyrics, but that's all right.
Hopefully I can live up to his standards. I mean,
he does a very good job.
It's a big seat to fill.
And that's why we don't mind, I don't know if you like that sentence, but that's all right. We're obviously stuck with me now, back to the old crew unfortunately, so people are just going to have to suck that one up, like, too bad, so sad. But
well, watching it again, I'm assuming they're expecting your face. It's
that's
fine.
true. But we do have a big episode to fill.
We absolutely do. There's lots talking about. I think we've got Project Cars and Forza.
Yes, so we're putting them head to head with a bit of a panel in the middle regarding loot boxes, which will come up later because it's a very interesting conversation.
It's a hot topic right now. I think there's a lot of discussion about Battlefront 2 and why it crashed and burned on day one with launches. And those microtransactions, they're nasty, but they're gone. So
for now, they'll be back.
That's right. So that's a big one. I think a lot of interesting things to talk about.
And the other review that we have for this week's episode is Wolfenstein, which brings me to the point I want to bring up with you. Okay, a little bit of spoilers. Game of the Year voting, you picked Horizon Zero Dawn as your #1 game. Heavy narrative-driven game.
Yes.
What did you like so much about Horizon Zero Dawn? Why was it #1 over everything else?
Look, it consumed me from the moment I put that disc in the console, and it was like one of the most visually stunning games I've played in a really long time. But not only that, Aloy, the main protagonist, was an amazing, strong female character, and the whole journey of her upbringing and that futuristic, but
dystopian,
exactly,
like
the
robot
robots.
Evolution.
Yeah, I loved every moment of it. And as the gameplay progressed, it got harder and more validating as you defeated those amazing dinosaur-type robots. It consumed me at every level, and I loved it from start to finish.
So it is an open world game, and the reason I bring it up is
to an extent.
You know what I mean? Like there's open fields that you explore and stuff like that. The reason I bring it up is because Zelda polled very well in our Game of the Year results. We won't tell you exactly what it got, but it polled very well. But it is the complete antithesis to that. It has no real it has an overarching story that's very light on. There's 4 main kind of points, if you will, but then everything else is kind of left to your leisure. So I wonder
endlessly. Let's be honest. Like it's unlimited.
Yeah, and that is so. It's interesting to see that there are still people who enjoyed those really heavy narrative-driven games in a world of Breath of the Wild.
It's going to be a massive discussion, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
So but for now, we are going to go to Wolfenstein. Now, one of the surprise hits of 2014, I want to say, was Wolfenstein: The New Order, and it was such a great game at just the time that I didn't expect it to be good. It was a remake. The last Wolfenstein game before that was the id one, where like I got what they were trying for, but it didn't work. But The New Order came out, it was great. BJ Blazkowicz was this like really kind of relatable, all-American hero, yet hokey enough, but still really good. And the action was great because you could mix between stealth. It was a fantastic game. The new one's come out. And I'm going to talk to Jamie about it because he knows the name better than I do. Jamie, it is Wolfenstein II.
The New Colossus.
The New Colossus. So, explain what the difference is.
So basically, for the most part, a lot of it, on face value, it's a lot of the same things. Like, a lot of the mechanics are very similar. There's a couple of new things, but for the most part, you're still stealthing if you want to. You're still murdering Nazis.
Knives are broken.
Yep, exactly like that. But things have changed in the last 3 years where, to not get too political about it, let's just say video game Nazis and actual Nazis may actually be kind of...
Well, they took over America. Let's just call it, it's old history.
Yes.
So it's it's old history. Basically, the Nazis have won. They've taken over America.
Yep.
It's now America with a K.
Yep.
And so basically, you are the resistance.
Yes, that is effectively the name of the game. And about that, like kind of the thing that I think, if we're going to talk about this at length, this is probably one of those games, and this is going to sound really weird if you're seeing this now, it's one of those games where if you're going to be playing this, don't know anything, don't look up anything going in. Go into this as blind as you can, because what they do in terms of story and character, and this is so weird speaking about a shooter, especially Wolfenstein, of all things, is really fucking good. Like, everything about it it nails it. The story is well written, the game is well written. Like, you give a shit about BJ Blazkowicz was for the longest time just like a little 4x4 icon.
Sprite on the thing,
And they actually flesh him out, and they give a reason for him to care about it.
Yeah, and that is probably the core strength of the game. All of the characters, while they may not be as fully fleshed out as you would expect, and some of them are just goddamn annoying, you still care for them, you still root for them, you still
Yeah.
want them to succeed, and it spans the wideness of the kind of the race rights and the civil rights divide. Like you've got like the African American resistance movement, you've got the American communist movement, you have the daughter of the main chick in it. So you've got all these different characters, these different takes on this whole history.
They build this really interesting universe, which I guess is kind of a trademark of Bethesda as a whole, but they do a really good job here. It's just kind of a shame that maybe the game part isn't as good as literally everything else around it.
Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest problem with the game is you know what to expect from it. It plays like the old one. There's new elements. There's still the two kind of fractured timelines where there's like a main split. So you get to play it at least twice and go back through it. But the biggest problem with that is that, it plays like the old one. So if you like the old one, you'll still enjoy it. If you didn't like the old one, you're not going to enjoy it. But I would say it's great. The ending is a little bit meh.
Look, it kind of falters towards the end, but before that, and well before that, it does a great job. So if anything, my advice to you is, if you want to give it a shot, just stick with it. Just stick with it. It will reward you. It will just reward you in spades.
If anyone wonders whether you're going to take it, the answer is probably yes.
Yes.
Now, anytime I see old people at the pokies, I often think to myself, they should be playing video games. They'll get the audio and visual stimulation they seem to crave, but they're not glued to one spot by predatory and manipulative algorithms draining their bank account. But is that the future for gamers as well? Are we destined to be sitting at a screen, pressing buttons, waiting for a nice reward while we spend a lot of money on it? Recently, there's been a lot of controversy about loot boxes and other features that have found their way into AAA games. Tonight we're going to discuss that. I'm joined by Jason and Donald. First, let's get out of the way. Some of the terms people hear in these, like Skinner boxes, Pavlovian response and that, for the audience, what do those things mean?
So Skinner boxing is basically like, it comes from an experiment done by psychologist B.F. Skinner in the 1940s. Basically, it's about training, in this example, a pigeon to undertake a specific behavior, which in this case is pressing a button. And the best way to do that is to dole out rewards for that pigeon. And the best way to get that pigeon to really learn quickly how to push that button is to dole out those rewards on a random basis. So you don't get a pallet for every 1 peck or 3 pecks. You get one for your 2nd peck, your 8th peck, your 15th peck. That'll train the pigeon to just keep on trying
basically,
to push that button. And the analogy between that and video games, people have tried to make a one-to-one connection with that.
And this is the thing, like, while we talk about loot boxes at the moment, and it is the big hot topic, keep in mind that this is 100% the basis of the Diablo games. It's been something that gaming has relied on in some capacity for a long time. Like, Blizzard invented this crap.
World of Warcraft, the loot drops in particular, like, you don't know when you're going to get your loot drops, but you know there's a chance, so you just keep on going and going.
And you'll beat a boss and you'll take out a raid or whatever, for a 0.5% or a 5% chance to drop X amount of epic loot and X amount of this and X amount of that. So the difference now is that people are basically paying for that direct chance. They're offering like boxes that you either pay for or you unlock, quote unquote, which then have a random chance to unlock X item. And that is why it's currently a big deal, is because in those Blizzard games, in the old Blizzard games, you used to just buy the game, play it, and it would use those mechanics, but it then wouldn't require necessarily any extra funds in order to loot box you or Skinner box you.
Yes, the whole thing has become really sort of weaponized nowadays, hasn't it?
So it's the balance between getting the reward and what you have to pay for the reward.
Yes.
And traditionally in games, and this probably really crept into gaming with mobile games. Anyone that's seen Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, things like that, they've been developed to get you to keep playing, to make you stay with the game. And when you do get frustrated, fork out some money to keep going. Although in some of the more recent cases, it appear like you're actually paying money to not have to play the game, which I find a very perverse
Well, that
thing
was
to
a big
find.
one with Game of War, wasn't it? Game of War's thing was you bought protection seals that meant that your town couldn't be raided for 24 hours. And there was one case I read of a guy who spent like $40,000 on protection seals just to protect what he does. So not only was it you were trying to win you unlocking these boxes to try and win further, you have to buy these boxes just to protect what you've already unlocked. Like, I mean, how ludicrous is that? Like, weaponized civilization.
Okay, that brings me to another term that I wanted to define as well. And a lot of people may not be familiar with this. This is definitely a gambling term, whale.
Yes.
Yes, that is basically the 1% of players that a lot of these free-to-play games rely on. Because broadly, 90% of people who play a free-to-play game won't ever spend any money. Then you have that extra 10% or so that 9% rather, that
Spend
some
up to
money.
$15 or something
Yep.
is the general rule.
But
yeah.
then you have that 1%, the whales, who can spend upwards of thousands of dollars on these games. And they can range from all demographics, from your sort of Wall Street executives who just have money to burn, to people with a lot more addictive personalities who just want that positive stimulation.
Candy Crush was built on board housewives.
Yeah.
I'm playing at home. I've hit this paywall. It's only $1. What do I care? Hubby earns enough. The family has enough money. Whatever. Bang. Put $1 into it.
And
done.
before you know it, it's a lot more than $1.
Correct.
And this is where we get into the problem, isn't it? Where you've got some people who are addictive personalities or are impatient for whatever reason, and what started out as I suppose a way to generate a bit more money. Because let's be honest about games, especially in the mobile area. We mentioned Candy Crush. Those games started out in an environment that Apple set up so that 99 cents was the de facto price for a game, and considered by some people expensive if you talk to normies, the game on their phones a lot. So those developers, they needed to make money somehow. And then you started to see in developer conferences the talk of monetization had to be built into every stage of a game as you're developing it. But that's taken on a new twist now when you're not just paying to get ahead, but you're paying to not have to play the game, and then trying to find those people who are maybe vulnerable and susceptible to gambling and really milking them for a lot of money.
But I think this is the other thing you've got to take in mind. It's another example where the Western industry has followed the Japanese industry. Like, Japanese are a big gambling country. Australia's a pretty big gambling country. Our gambling losses on a per capita basis are huge. Japan's still above us, I'm pretty sure. But they've had gashapon and the idea of they're called gacha games. Like a lot of the Asian games that come through are gacha games, and basically you pay X amount, you unlock a chest, and you might get one epic card or one epic character or whatever the case may be. And they've been doing that for years and years and years, and it's a cultural thing where it's just not viewed as a problem. And we're also seeing a lot more of it now because China is big in the scene and Korea are big in the scene, where gambling has its own mystique inside that culture. Like, it's like a genuine thing that we don't understand coming from that Western viewpoint.
However, there is also a key difference between the way that Japan and China have implemented and the way that Western developers have recently implemented it with loot boxes, in that the transparency is still an element. It's legally required, especially in China. You have to disclose the odds of getting the big, happy, legendary item. Meanwhile, Western developers, they don't disclose these odds, and indeed, like in the case of Blizzard games like Overwatch, Hearthstone, and games like that, they have found ways around Chinese laws so they don't ever have to disclose the chances of getting a legendary skin.
Just quickly, we're going to continue this conversation here, and we're going to go on next into issues like the randomness of collectibles and things like that. Check out the extended version of this on YouTube, New Game Plus TV on YouTube, or at our website, www.newgameplus.tv.
Now, as discussed previously, it really is a kind of a new era of simulation racing games. So Forza 7 is the next one on our particular chopping block. Jamie, what are your thoughts on Forza 7?
So it is a good racing game. It feels great to be playing a real Forza game with the driving, with just a great level of physics. And one of the cool new things they had in this game is they had proper weather, dynamic weather.
Yes, so like you mentioned, like just being able to actually change the weather and have it change based on the races, which is something that Forza's never done before.
And just the feeling of you're starting a race normally, all of a sudden rain's coming in, and it just buckets down, and it just changes the race dramatically. It is legitimately terrifying. It's amazing. It's legitimately terrifying.
It was one of those things that Forza's been kind of missing for a while. Do you know what I mean? Like, every other game started doing it, and yeah, they were more of a focused experience, stuff like that. But it's good to see that the guys at Forza have managed to, or Turn 10 have managed to shift the engine to the point where weather can be done.
I noticed the joke you made there. Yeah, it was great. It was right. But look, I like playing this game. I think it's a great driving game, and racing it and customizing it all works super well. Yeah. Some of the stuff they do around this game is just frustrating to no end. Like, it looks amazing, they do everything right, but then just little things that don't quite work.
Now, I'm going to use my favorite line. We are not the target audience. We understand what microtransactions are. We understand what a dearth they are to this industry.
Right.
So we understand how bad they are. The problem is the normies who buy like Forza 7, right? They don't mind. They're the kind of people who can buy the big rigs, who can do all that. They've got all the extra money, right? They don't give a shit about like chucking $15 at it every now and then.
It's just, though, I mean, look, they do their best to make it so it's not totally exploitative, and that's fine. But it's like, what they're doing is they're cutting out stuff to make it so you have to buy loot boxes.
Yes.
Like, you don't earn as much money during races anymore. You have to kind of play to their game as opposed to playing the game that I would want to play, or you would want to play, or you would want to play.
And the big difference between it and, say, Project Cars, which we covered like the other day,
Yes.
was that Project Cars encourages you to get better through repetition. You play the same races, you play the same thing, you learn how to drive better. By removing the incentives for you to pick manual and turn off racing lines and turn off that, they are removing the incentive for you to become a better player.
Right, yeah. I mean, I've had races where I have just been struggling, like I've had to turn on that kind of stuff, and I don't feel like I'm learning.
Yes.
And I feel like it kind of dumbs me down. It just...
Because in the previous games, you used to get a bonus if you played with manual clutch, you could play with manual.
And you could always toggle it off. Like,
you could turn it on and off,
yeah,
absolutely.
Like, it was a really smart system.
Yeah, but now there's really no incentive to do that, because to get the bigger experience boost or the bigger money boost, you have to pay money.
Because all relies on their fancy mod system, which is still kind of not a great system.
Yes, and so this is the biggest problem with Forza Motorsport, is that it is the second wave of the microtransaction. We've always had microtransactions, especially since they first got introduced, right?
Yep.
So we always knew what to expect from them, but then they got a bit scared and they stopped doing it. It's back. Like, when people like Warner Brothers and Microsoft are pushing them into these situations, it makes the gaming world worse.
And it's a shame because it's a good, technically,
Yes.
technically just masterpiece of a game.
Yes.
Like, if I had a 4K television, Xbox One X, I'd be just raving about it.
Yes.
But at the moment, just some of the stuff they do is just, guys, take a step back. You've got a great racing game. You kind of don't need to go down this path. You really don't.
They like money. Now, it's been an interesting time for car racing games in the world of video games. We've gone from this strange thing where lots of people are releasing all of these different arcade-style races, Forza Horizon, a lot of the Codemaster stuff went a little bit more arcadey. Suddenly, though, like, just out of nowhere, we're back in the simulation world. And so we've got Project Cars, Forza 7, and the new GT coming out as well. So it's a big time for simulation games. Project Cars 2 is the game we're talking about today. Jamie, what's your thought process? What are you thinking?
So what I'm thinking at the moment is I like Project Cars' approach in general, where it is a game where you look at, say, Forza GT, they're games about building up a collection of cars, doing them up, putting fat spoilers on them, putting all the wheels on them, and dressing them up for anime girls because I'm a horrible
Well,
human being.
it's their own separate kind of community that may not even necessarily race them, but they'll put anime girls on them.
Of course.
Yeah, so whereas it covers a lot of different subgenres.
As with P-Cars, though, Project Cars is more or less about the driving. It is a game about racing. Because you have a smaller collection of cars and a smaller collection of tracks compared to Forza or GT, but it's more or less about, okay, those cars it's a really focused collection that drives really well, and a really focused selection of tracks that they just scanned and analyzed and made sure that it works perfectly for the developer's vision of this idea of a racing sandbox.
Yes, and I guess that is the big difference. So, where you have Forza, where it is that little bit, we're this small car club and we're buying all these smaller cars, we're building up, all that kind of stuff. And you're buying all the different upgrades and stuff like that. This is more a case of, here is this particular either production or performance car, here's this particular race car, here are the options you have to configure it the way you want or that you think will suit the track that we're racing on, go race. And that's,
Yeah, and one of the great things they do on that is they introduce this feature called the Race Engineer. So what you can do before any race is, you can, let's say you're driving a couple of practice runs, which you should be doing because it's the kind of game you need it for. Absolutely. And so you realize, okay, maybe the car's not driving the way I'd like. Like maybe you're not turning in too much, or too little, or you're not getting enough acceleration. What you can do is you can go to your race engineer and say, hey, this is a problem, what can I do about this? And the race engineer will explain to you in layman's terms, okay, this is what you should be doing to modify the car to actually perform the way you want it to do.
Which is, obviously Forza and those kind of games have that as well, where you buy the upgrades and all that kind of thing. And it always gave you these like detailed explanations of, if you increase the diff, it'll change your turning, oversteer and stuff like that. But to actually have something that goes through that process and takes these people who say want to get better at car racing games, and shows them those particular steps and kind of not handholds them, but really explains it. That's a niche that no one has really explored well, and I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, because I mean, if anything, it's one of the few things that games give you, because it is in some less creative people would call this the Dark Souls of racing games. We're not going to because it's a bad thing to say. But it is a game that is challenging. It's a game that it forces you to learn how to drive a car properly. It forces you to learn how to actually race a car properly, which again, this is a game where you need to practice and practice and practice. And if you're one of those people who have a really kind of big, crazy $1,000 rig set up with multi-screens and the steering wheel and even the crazy D-boxing, because I know that's totally a thing, this is a game that's perfect for you. It's absolutely perfect for that.
So that was Project Cars.
What did you think?
So the big thing with Project Cars and Forza is the way they handle what they're doing. Forza is very much more aimed at the dad market.
Yeah, they're very different games, yet deliver the same kind of thing. So.
And they are pretty much going for the same. Like, I guess the big difference is Project Cars is going for that little bit more kind of track-focused experience. Like, you're doing this, you're doing that, and I think that's its strength and its weakness. Because it is so focused, you know what you're getting because of what's on the box.
Yeah.
Whereas with Forza, I get to drive the new, Ferrari around like Le Mans or something like that, and so it's a lot easier to do that kind of like car porn kind of thing, and they do
they both deliver the schmicko car porn very well. And I think for an outsider that's not a car driving game fan, I think you have to really do your research to find those differences. But with the microtransactions in Forza versus not having it in Project Cars, there's a bit of a difference
and
there
so
as well.
That is the thing. So Project Cars usually supports with DLC packs, so whether they're free or whatever.
Season passes and stuff?
I don't think it's season, I think it's just genuinely, but because it has that more, I guess, PC background where you download the individual packs that you're interested in as opposed to a thing. And so Forza, however, XP boosts and all that kind of stuff, it used to be controlled by the difficulty you played on. So if you played on hard difficulty, manual clutch, no driving line, no ABS, you got extra 75% bonus XP. But they don't do that anymore.
Is Project Cars still crowdfunded with a lot of community-based forums?
Namco bought them basically.
Okay,
but at the same time, they still have a very strong community, and this is the thing. So you can tell the two different markets that they're going for. So Forza, you can go basically from that Forza Horizon, the almost arcadey style handling, right the way up, whereas Project Cars is learn how to drive, learn how to tune.
Perfect.
Don't do that, or get the hell out. Don't waste our goddamn time. And so, I don't know, it's interesting to see that they understand still that the loot boxes will only work for the normies. You couldn't get away with loot boxes in a hardcore community like that. That said, I've seen a lot of the hardcore Japanese game communities with their gacha, and it's pretty bad. Anyway, thus ends another show. Thank you very much for joining me, Megan.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
So don't forget to check us out at newgameplus.tv or on YouTube and Facebook at newgameplus.tv. Anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I'll see you guys next week. I'll be back.
Beautiful.
I know where you live now, so.
Weird. All right, whatever. Bye.